Hello and welcome to the Cardiac Cats YouTube channel. I'm your host, Jacob Shorba, and today I am here with Jets Chaos, where we are going to be doing a first-round mock draft in a what I would do version of it. So we're both going to be making picks based off how we see these prospects, where they should go. Not really a point in doing predictive here because we want to get some different opinions from other scouts and really talk about some of these prospects. So with that said, how are you doing today, Jeremy?
I'm doing well. Doing well. Excited to do another mock draft, especially from the perspective of what each team should be doing.
Yeah, and there's no limit. I mean, I don't think I've ever said to myself, like, oh, I've done too many mock drafts, I gotta stop. It just goes all year. I mean, April 28th this year, I'll probably be doing a 2026 mock draft, as disgusting as that is. But that's just part of it. Let us know a little bit about your channel. I definitely want to shout that out here. What do you do and what do you cover and all that information?
Yeah, so I'm back to doing, I go on and off in life, but I'm back to doing pretty much a video every day, or 5 out of the 7 days of a week. I'll do a short video. But lately I've been doing one every day, just covering some of the new news and just reaction to the New York Jets news. I have a live show every Sunday night at 9 o'clock Eastern with Dom C, who's a guy who is a really trained scout. You know, he went to scouting school, the whole thing, and he loves to. We go to the Senior Bowl together, and he loves to rate and analyze players. And we've actually been doing a breakdown of like the top 10 or the top 8 in every position in this year's draft.
Nice. And for everyone who's on this channel and watched for a while, you might remember Dom C. He was on our last mock draft that we did for the whole first round, so might be a little familiar with him. But both these guys met him at the Senior Bowl, had a great week out there, and definitely wanted to get him on the channel. And this was a great opportunity to have you on, Jeremy. So what we're going to be doing here, like we said, is a what we would do mock draft. We are going to be alternating picks. He's going to be taking odds. I'm going to be taking the evens. And then we are going to pick for each other's teams as well and analyze that, I'm sure, very harshly, of course, because that's what you're supposed to do when you don't get the player you want. You got to be really upset about it. So, as I'm joking about that, let's go ahead and jump into this. You got the Tennessee Titans at number 1. Would you consider trading out of this pick, or are you set on staying at number 1 with the Titans?
At this point, look, if somebody offered them the moon, then the trade is always a possibility. It's always an acceptable move. But I think if I'm sitting there at 1, I have a chance to take the number 1 quarterback in the draft on the board. It's not my favorite year for quarterback, but having the opportunity to take the best quarterback in the country, and where there's a wide margin, knowing that he brings mobility, given that they don't seem to have their answer at quarterback right now, I think I have to swing. And again, I'm not thrilled about it. I think there'll be better options next year, but I don't think you could wait another year. I think you got to get busy living. So if I'm Tennessee, I just take Cam Ward. It's not like they have to trade up to get him or anything like that. So yes, it's a expensive, valuable number 1 pick that you're using, but it's an important position. And if you can hit on it, it sets your franchise up for years.
Yeah, I totally agree there. That would be the pick for me as well. Cam Ward, it's funny. If I had scouted him last year, I wonder what my grade would have been, because going into this year, I had him as more of a late first, early second guy because of the potential. And then obviously he had this great year with Miami. I think it's a really enticing option for the Titans, especially in a division where you've got a lot of highly drafted quarterbacks. I would argue 2 of 3 are working out right now. I think Anthony Richardson obviously is the big question mark for them. But if you're picking that high and you've got a franchise type of guy there, you got to take a shot on it. Something interesting that you said, and I'm not quite familiar yet too far with the 2026 quarterback class, aside from guys who returned to school that could have been eligible this year. How do you see that right now as far as the pecking order, the type of talent? What would you compare it to, I guess, in like recent years? Is this a good quarterback class coming up next year?
I think it's going to be special. I mean, we don't know if Arch Manning's going to come out or not. We don't know how he hasn't played. We're going to see how he does in Texas. If he has a year that backs up anything we saw from his high school film and the way he was recruited, um, he could end up being very special. He might be a guy that stays in school, though. He might, because he might not have a breakout year his first year at this level, playing in Texas. So we have to see. I think Drew Aller right away. I mean, you have a guy that would be the top of this class, right? So with
Yeah,
unquestionably
right
in
up.
my, so I know you have a prime guy already. I also really like the quarterback from Georgia Tech, King. I'm not sure of his last name. I think that he's going to be a guy who rises, right? Who people might not be talking about now, but I think he got a lot of more eyes on him, after playing Georgia and putting up like 40 points last year. I think people started to notice him, but I think that he's going to get noticed a lot more. Incredibly mobile, big, strong, powerful arm, could throw it touch, could throw it with arm strength. Um, and then it's just a question of who's coming out and not coming out, because I thought there were a few sophomores, that played well. It's just a matter of who's coming out, but it's not hard to be better than this year. Really, just not high on the quarterback class this year at all.
Yeah, it's been a bit disappointing, although I will say there was a point where it felt like there might not be a quarterback getting taken this high. I remember when the Jaguars held the first overall pick throughout most of this year, part of my thinking, just having honestly given up on the season, knowing you got a lame duck head coach, was I'm hoping to God that someone stands out so that this pick is worth something so you can move out of it. And obviously, Jacksonville has the fifth pick. They didn't finish the tank, and, is what it is. But Cam Ward, was that guy. I think Shedeur Sanders is definitely someone to talk about, and I will talk about him here at 2. But it is exciting to hear some hype about next year's quarterback class. I'm hoping that it is not just in the regards of the quarterback class, but the whole class in general, a little bit better than this year, where it feels like there's some really special players at the top of this draft, but it falls off really quickly to where I get into like mid to late first round grades, maybe before you're through the top 10. And that just honestly is kind of disappointing for the amount of time we've been leading up to this. But yeah, I love hearing the analysis on quarterbacks in the future. It's going to be something to watch, especially if Arch Manning ends up declaring. And that is some of the thought process here with the Cleveland Browns. Are you going to be in a position next year to take a quarterback? And are there going to be good quarterbacks in that class?
I also forgot to mention Nussbaumer from LSU will be coming out. So,
okay, yeah, that's right. And as well, you're talking about the Georgia Tech guy. Man, it just reminded me of watching that Georgia Tech Georgia game. That was the craziest game I've seen in a while. It was like 8 overtimes, something like that, if I recall correctly.
yeah, it was
Yeah,
wild.
I was staying up forever that night. But that was a fun game. I just wish Georgia Tech had, won it. It
Yeah,
is
that would
what
have
it
been.
is. Yeah, game of the year. Now, okay, Cleveland Browns. This is a hard pick. I've honestly been thinking about this probably for more than a day since we planned this. And look, for me, on my big board, we'll go to the top players here. Travis Hunter and Abdul Carter. Best players in the class. I would probably take Travis Hunter of the non-quarterbacks. I have Shedeur Sanders as a first-round prospect, although a late grade. I think if you're the Cleveland Browns, you've got a lot of money invested in Deshaun Watson. You can't get out. You need someone young to come in at that position. And while Shedeur Sanders is not the ideal prospect from the size perspective, even some of the leadership qualities are questionable, although some are also tremendous at times when he sits in the pocket, he takes a big hit to go deliver the big throw. I do think that if it was me at number 2, well, he is not the best player in this class, I would draft Shedeur Sanders and hope that you hit on the quarterback, because you don't have one. You need to admit that, and you just got to keep swinging until you get one. And of course, there is obviously the big risk with this, because you do pass on what could be a generational talent in Travis Hunter. But I think if you can hit on the quarterback, I'd probably be taking Shador Sanders here. So, what are your thoughts on that? Because I don't know if it's going to be in agreement, but I think it's definitely worth talking about.
Well, I think there's a very good chance that's what Cleveland's going to do. And I feel the same way about the Cam Ward pick. It's like something you kind of do with a gun held to your head. You're kind of like,
Yeah.
what am I going to do? We're stuck all this money in Watson. They can't go out and buy in free agency, spend any money on a real quarterback. And to sit there and say we're going to crash another year and then take another shot the year after, and they just re-signed and extended and made Myles Garrett the most richest, most highest paid positional player. So there's commitment to win and be good moving ahead. I just don't. I think it's a pick that's just out of having no choice. And
Yeah.
I agree that that's kind of like the pick you have to make. And he's probably my quarterback 7 if it was last year. Or 6. So it's a rough one to have to make, but I kind of expect the Cleveland Browns to make this pick.
And it's really interesting because you don't hear this as the pick. You keep getting told over and over that it's Abdul Carter, right? It's like the same thing in every mock draft and every news report. And it's so hard for me to believe because how do you go into the next season knowing you don't have your franchise quarterback? Your coach, even as a former coach of the year, probably on the hot seat. How do you believe in Kenny Pickett for that? Or how do you, I don't care what the situation is, how can you tell yourself as an organization, well, let's just take the good player here and then try to take our quarterback later? If you're going to take a quarterback, you got to take the best one you can. You don't say, oh, let's downgrade there. It's not like, let's say linebacker, and it's like, hey, it'd be great to have a good one, but let's just get one that's a starter. It's a better use of resources. You try to get the best you can at quarterback. So it just seems like a lot of the things that are floated around with the Browns don't really make a ton of sense to me. And I'm just shocked how many people are saying that this is just not going to be a quarterback.
Yeah, it's surprising. I mean, but if there's any way to make sense of it all, it's just basically how people feel about Sanders as a quarterback. Just
Yeah,
not believing in him.
and that's completely fair. Like, if he's not a good enough prospect, totally get it. But I do feel like with Sanders, well, he's not going to be my highest rated quarterback ever, right? But if you get a good offensive line out in front of him and you allow him to have protection, you give him receivers, and you give him a shot, I think you have a good quarterback. I think you got someone who can manage the offense well. I think he does a lot of what they would want there, and precision passing, being accurate, being reliable. And I think that's good for Cleveland at the end of the day. But if you don't see him that way, totally get it, right? You don't make that pick there and you pick Travis Hunter. But that's not what we do here. I do see Sanders as a franchise quarterback, even if it's not a top 5 guy in the NFL. So that leaves you with New York Giants in what would be a very precarious situation because you don't have the trade up with the Titans, which it was rumored that they lowballed the Titans at first, which led to the price going up as they got more familiar with Cam Ward. And now the Browns have taken Shador Sanders. So what approach do you take here at number 3 for the New York Giants?
I think the Giants, like at this point, are just going to run to the podium and grab Travis Hunter.
Yeah, I like the pick. I totally agree. If you don't have the quarterback here, you got to take the best player available. Is Travis Hunter your top player, out of curiosity? Because I know it's either Hunter or Carter for most people.
I have him graded equal to Abdul Carter. As like his best position. If you say cornerback to edge, I kind of have an equal grade on them. Travis Hunter being a guy that can come in to the Giants on third down and passing situations and add some electricity, opposite of Neighbors, is what would put him ahead of Abdul Carter. Just the impact that he can make on both sides of the ball. I don't know if he's a guy who's going to play every rep at wide receiver. I would expect him to play as right away, be immediately their starting cornerback, and I would expect him to get reps on the offense in strategic moments, times where you have 3 wide receiver sets. Um, and I think that he's going to bring value there. He's going to be a problem for teams.
Yeah, it's the same valuation actually for myself. I think with Hunter, if it's just the corner, it's about equal to where Abdul Carter is. Although I do think Hunter has more generational type traits maybe than what Carter has. But you throw in the wide receiver side of it where if you don't have him on the field at all as a receiver, you're wasting so much of what he is as a player. I understand it's a question of how often he's out there, but any amount I think sets him up over Abdul Carter. And I say that as someone who, from the moment I watched Carter this offseason, I had him as a top 3 player in this class, only behind Travis Hunter and Will Johnson. Now he's ahead of Johnson, but I can't get him to the level of Travis Hunter. But what I can do here at number 4 with the New England Patriots is run up to the podium and take what I think is the best player that's still available, and also probably one of the most valuable positions that you could add at, aside from the quarterback position. And obviously they have their guy in Drake May. It would be nice to go after an offensive lineman. I think there could be a great opportunity to maybe move up into the first round again, try to target someone who's falling, like maybe a Josh Simmons. But to me, you just got to take the best player available on a team that needs more talent, and that is Abdul Carter from Penn State to the New England Patriots. So what are your thoughts on that? Is he your next up guy? I think you kind of answered that, but still curious.
Oh yeah, I mean, like intellectually, logically, there's no question in my mind that Abdul Carter is the pick here. There's just absolutely no question. Emotionally, my heart really wants New England to pick Will Campbell because I'm a Jets fan and I want them to make that mistake. I really want them to mess that up and take Will Campbell. I think that would be, not to give too much about my feelings about Will Campbell now. We'll probably end up talking about him later. But as much as I would hate to see them do it, it's the move that New England they should sprint to the podium and grab Abdul Carter. Sprint.
Yep. Totally agree. A blue chip prospect, if you're able to get one in this class where there are not a ton of them, you got to do it. So it just felt like the only option there. Now, I am really curious what you're going to do with the Jacksonville Jaguars here, because there's a lot of enticing options. Maybe it is the consensus pick that you've heard all the time. Maybe it's something different. I'll give my thoughts on what I would do in this situation after you. But you're up on the clock at number 5 for the Jaguars. All these people are waiting to hear what your pick is. Getting ready to go in the comments and give their thoughts, I'm sure. But what would you do in this situation for Jacksonville with the 2 quarterbacks and the 2 top players off the board?
So here's the thing: if they eliminated the rest of the draft, there was no second round and above, right? All those players go away, and it's just 1 round, and none of those players existed in the world. I might actually go Tyler Warren here. And the reason I would do that is because I think it would be great help to Trevor Lawrence. I think he brings a tremendous amount to the team because he can block. You can line him up as a fullback. He's a receiver. His floor is just because one thing you don't want to do in the first round is miss on a player. Tyler Warren probably has the highest floor of any player in this draft. Like, there's just no way I see a world where Tyler Warren is not very good. Where, you know what I mean? But I know that people will say drafting him at 5 is way too high because he's a tight end, and a lot of people feel that way. But you have to understand the draft and the reality that we're in. We're living in a reality where this is not a top-heavy draft. There just are not that many top players. The sweet spot of the draft is the second and third round. With all of that said, the reality is there is a second round, there is a third round, there is a fourth round, there is a fifth round. The reality is this is an incredibly deep draft at tight ends. And I believe there are a lot of tight ends that have close ceilings to Tyler Warren. They could bust. They don't have the high floor that he has. But there's lots of guys to choose from all the way into the third round easy, if not the beginning of the fourth round. So many tight ends in this draft. The same is true for this other position, but I'm going to say they missed out on Abdul Carter. They're certainly disappointed. They were probably hoping New England was going to take Will Campbell as well. I think that Jacksonville I think I would. I don't know that they will because I know they have an offensive-minded coach. But I think if I was Jacksonville, I would take Mason Graham here and just lock in a disruptive force on the defensive line, and then worry about my tight end in the second round.
All right. So Mason Graham, so there has been just endless talk about him in Jaguars Twitter for gosh, over a month now, and it seems like this is not only the consensus pick, but it seems the way that things are pointing that this is going to be the guy for Jacksonville. And for me, ultimately, I do think Mason Graham is a first round type of player. I think he's a very good player. My concern at the end of the day, and look, if you hit on the player, doesn't really matter a whole lot. You've got a good addition here. It is, will Mason Graham be a top 5 guy when you look back at this class? And I wonder how high the ceiling is there. I do think the floor is very high with him. That may be more my question here. But ultimately, I mean, this is a big addition in a big area that you want to address. I think having a disruptive guy on the interior does a lot for this football team, especially when you have two very good edge rushers in Josh Hines-Allen and Trayvon Walker. And it sucks when they try to get to the quarterback and you can step up in the pocket and you can throw. And so Mason Graham helps tremendously with that, as will, other things such as Eric Armstead finally playing inside, which did not happen last year for whatever reason. But yeah, I do like Mason Graham here. I think it's a fine pick. Not necessarily what I would do, but at the end of the day, you're still getting a good football player, and you can convince yourself of that type of selection. And maybe we're all just scarred from Taven Bryan at the same time, so that's probably part of this. I've already seen enough people compare him to Taven Bryan. Not that he is Taven Bryan. Now, if it was me, I have looked at this very simply. And I like what Daniel Jeremiah said the other day. That he basically said, you don't take good players over great players in this draft. And while there are certainly positions that are more important, and I do think things are changing a little bit here, I would be fine taking a blue chip player this high, maybe at a position that people don't value as much. And so that could be a Tyler Warren, where there is a scenario where he could be the top guy for me. But to myself, I think the player that I would have taken here was Ashton Genty. I know you have a running back in Travis Etienne. I know you've got another guy in Tank Bigsby. I don't think either move the needle at this point. And to bring home, because he is from Jacksonville, a guy who could be a top-end running back, be an elite type of player, and to lock that down for a long time, I think would be a tremendous addition. And at the end of the day, especially in a draft class that is not as strong as others, I don't think they would regret it. But that's just my opinion, and I think there's pros and cons to all these things. So I'm curious kind of what you think of that approach, or if that's something you've really ever thought of to the Jaguars.
I don't think it's an unreasonable point that you make. I mean, he is probably. I think he's probably my highest rated player that's left on the board for them.
Yep. Case for me, he is my number.
It's hard to argue with the logic of let's take a superstar, right? I mean, I'm pretty confident that he's going to be a very elite running back. He's going to be a great running back. If you're not happy with what you have, I know that, I don't have the perspective of a Jacksonville fan to know that. But he's, he has a very good chance to be right up there with, with names like Barkley, with names like, Henry, with names like, being a top 5 in the league, rush for 1,500 yards, 8 to 12 touchdowns, be really a powerful force. I see why you'd want that. It would take a lot of, force the defenses to put more guys in the box, make life easier for Trevor Lawrence. Great compliment to BTJ. It's hard to argue that pick. It's not something I really saw coming from you, only because running backs kind of have lost value in the draft traditionally. This is a deep draft at running back. But even though it's a deep draft at running back, none of those other guys have the almost like that high floor that Gentry has. I mean, when you look at him warming up as pro day, I mean, the guy just is a beast. So I think it's a fine pick. A little surprised. But I don't. I think I respect that take from a fan of that team.
Yeah, and part of it that I didn't mention as well is when you look at what the Jaguars have done this offseason, so many of their additions, it is raising the floor. It is essentially bringing in a lot of average to this team. When you look at this roster, surely there's players that we have high hopes for that we hope can be really good, but you really talk about superstars, and the list could arguably end at Brian Thomas Jr. I know Josh Hines-Allen exists too, and he's a really good player. He teeters on that level. Trevor Lawrence has a lot to prove as well. You could talk about Trayvon Walker, but right now he is simply a good defensive end, and he could become more than that. But you look at this roster, and they need superstars. And so Mason Graham could be that. I'm not going to sit here and say that that's impossible or even super unlikely, but I think you have a surefire thing in Ashton Jeanty. At the same time, this team the last couple of years has not given a crap about the run game. They have gone out of their way to acquire players who will contribute nothing to the run game. And they have a lot of work to fix that. And while you do have to do the work to support a top-tier running back, I think they've done enough to be able to start out. I would continue to invest in the offensive line, to continue to invest in any type of blocker you can bring in. But I think this would be a pick that would really help out with Jacksonville. And it is a different take, right? You don't hear this a lot. And there's pros and cons to everything, as we'll say here. So great conversation there. I think there's two very good sides to that. And it's interesting to hear your thoughts on it. But you're up now at number 6, and we're getting close to the Jets pick, and I'm sure we'll have a fun conversation there. Who are you going to take for the Las Vegas Raiders?
Oh, we swapping? I'm going to take the Raiders, so you can take the Jets.
I'm going to take the Jets, and you're going to take the Panthers. But if you want to flip here, we can.
Okay, we can switch to even numbers. No, that's no problem. If I'm the Raiders here,
okay.
I'm a big, a lot of Jet fans. I wanted them on the Jets for a while, and I know a lot of people are down on this player and everything, but I think the Raiders, the biggest need that they absolutely have to fill here, where, I mean, it's really tough. There's some great players here, and I could see them going cornerback, but I just don't think the depth in the draft is there. So if they don't do it now, when are they going to do it? So I think they're going to take Ted McMillan. He is my number one wide receiver. He's not my number one wide receiver by a mile. The gap got a lot narrower with Golden. And again, in a normal year, McMillan would not go this high, but he is my number one receiver. They lost Devontae Adams. I think that if they really want to be a serious team that people want to watch, even if there's a rebuild, and they got Geno Smith, they need to get him a receiver. So I just don't see any choice here.
Yeah, I would be right there with you. I think that's got to be one of the top options. I may still go Jeanty there, but Tetairoa McMillan, he fills a huge need. He's a top player in this class, and you're just loading up on offense with weapons for Geno Smith, who they just extended today, not only maybe a couple hours ago. So, I mean, it seems like they're pretty locked in there, and to bring in a player like McMillan really helps out with that receiving game, brings in a different type of guy. And it really sets up that offense well. So I'm there with you for that pick. I think that's a great addition for the Raiders. So to clarify, I will pick for the Jets and then the Panthers here, correct? Is that how we worked it out? I confused myself in this whole thing.
Okay, however you want to do it. Yep.
I think that's correct. Okay. So for the New York Jets, I think I know which direction I'm going here. When I'm looking at the board, I would almost want to talk about Ashton Jeanty, but I just don't think it is an area that they need like other teams that we're talking about at the top. You talk about the Raiders. I mean, they had the worst rushing attack last year. Jacksonville's obviously had a huge problem there. Even New England has had struggles at the position, but obviously you weren't going to take him over Abdul Carter because that's a little insane. But with the New York Jets, it's just not a direction I think that they need to go. It would be a little reckless here at number 7. So it leaves options for you, such as I would say starting with Tyler Warren, who would be my top player at this point, 4th on my big board. I think you look at what they want to do on that team. My impression is that they want to get really tough players. They want to get guys who are going to help build up that culture. And I think Tyler Warren's the perfect guy for that. If I'm talking about other players here, I mean, I think Will Campbell is just a really nice addition to an offensive line, even if it's not at tackle. I don't know the full situation with the interior there. I know they've got some players like Elijah Vera Tucker, for example, who I was a fan of when he came out. Aside from that, though, man, I think those are kind of your two options that you have here. And I would say I would go with Tyler Warren in this case. So with that said, what would you have done with the New York Jets? Are you in agreement there? Or is there another player you would have wanted to target?
Man, it's so tough. My number one obviously desires to trade back. There's nothing I would rather see than a trade back. I'm okay if they take Tyler Warren here. My hesitance is the depth of the tight end class. I my wide receiver's gone, and it's Golden would be really high for the Jets to take here.
Yeah.
I really think it to the Jets. I think it's going to come down for the Jets, and I think it would for me as well. It would come down to Tyler Warren and Armand Membo. I think I would have went with Membo, and it's only because there are tight ends I really like in this draft. I love Tyler Warren, but there's so many guys that I've been watching that I really like and wouldn't mind having. I think the best combination for the Jets would be to get Membo and get a guy like Mason Taylor in the second round, or a guy like Terrence Ferguson in the third round, and address tight end that way. But I'm okay with the Tyler Warren pick because my number one rule, again, with these early picks, for teams like ours, for Jacksonville, for the Jets, you can't miss. You really can't miss. If you
Exactly.
miss, you're in big, big trouble, right? I mean, more than anything, you just need to hit. And Tyler Warren is probably the safest pick of any player left on this board. So I think I would be completely fine with Tyler Warren as the pick, even though I may have went for Membo.
Yeah, no, I definitely understand that argument. And I think as well, you think about Membu and where he's played, it's an easy fit, right? You've got Olu at left tackle already, who's going to be an awesome player for the future of that team. And then you bring in Membu to play right tackle. Easy fit, someone who's just got tools for days to work with, very refined player. And you're sitting in a good situation if you're the Jets. You also talk about trading back. The one player the one team I think you maybe could have talked about there, although I don't think they would have done it just because there are two top tight ends in this class. I could have seen the Indianapolis Colts being a little interested. But at the end of the day, I think if you're the Colts, and we'll see what happens here, of course, you're probably wanting Colston Loveland to fall to pick 14. You don't want to have to give up a whole lot. And if you see him as a top tight end, that's a great deal. Maybe the Bears look at running back at that selection and want to move up for Ashton Genty, but are you competing against anyone, right? Are the Panthers going to take Genty? Are the Saints going to do it? It's kind of questionable, and probably not the direction either of those teams go. So that's
We were
kind of
hop-
where I end up with that.
we were hoping if nobody took him and Genty was still on the board, the two teams that might come up that we could play against each other is the Chicago and Dallas.
Yeah, those would definitely have to be the two teams. Now, I control both of them, so I will say, okay, looking at the Panthers pick here, I did think for a moment just about, do you just take the best player on the board in Ashton Genty? And it sounds crazy. I'm not going to do it, but Chuba Hubbard, obviously, got the big contract extension. That's probably the thing that stops me here the most. But Jonathan Brooks is in a situation where we don't know what's going to happen with him, right? Retore his ACL. I think the same one they tore in college. So just a terrible situation there. But at the end of the day, I just can't justify it. It's the same as the Jets, where there's just not the need there. Same with the Saints here. So, yeah, you've got the Bears. You've got the Dallas Cowboys, and maybe if you have a team getting really aggressive coming from far back, could we talk about the Chargers maybe moving up this far, or do you think that's a little bit too much?
I mean, anything's possible. It's not. I don't know if it's the style of the coach uh, to
And they
do
did get
that.
Harris, actually. I kind of forgot on that. So they do have a running back that they acquired. What did they pay him? Was it quite a bit?
Running backs don't typically make that much, so I
Yeah, I
don't know.
thought he got like 10 million. So yeah, we'll
Oh,
scratch that one because it's a different situation now, I guess. What I will ask you here: which team do you think would be more desperate between the Bears and between the Cowboys at this point?
um,
Don't look at their draft capital as well.
I think the Bears would be. I mean, it's hard to know because the emotion of Jerry Jones, right? Like he's an
Yeah,
emotional guy. He loves the big name. He's probably in love with this guy, right? But I think as a team who needs it more, I think the Bears need it more as far as Genty because they they have the younger, more inexperienced quarterback they're trying to develop, and I really think that Genty bringing in a franchise type running back, like a guy who's franchise changing, like Barkley was for the Eagles, like that level caliber of potential running back, I think would be so helpful for the development of their quarterback because it would take so much pressure off of him, and allow him to develop, and have that safety blanket of having, that dominant running back who can really help the offense. So I think that for Chicago, it's the bigger need. It would be more value, but it's hard to measure the emotions of Jerry Jones of wanting to get who he wants.
for sure. And the thing with Chicago too, though, even if he gets emotional and wants to move up for him, Jerry, that is, Chicago has a lot to work with here, right? They got an extra second in this class. No, they don't have a fourth, but overall they have more draft capital than most teams in terms of value. And then you also talk about what are the remaining needs, right? What other direction are they going at number 10? The offensive line's filled out. You don't really have major needs on this offense. I guess they could maybe add a slot receiver if I'm not missing some signing that happened. Obviously, Keenan Allen is not there anymore. They could use a top pass rusher as well. I don't see that guy here personally, unless you're really comfortable with Mike Green, which there's some questions there. So it's probably got to be Ashton Genty and trying to replicate what you did with a dominant run game in Detroit. So I would have to agree. This is the team to do it. As far as the value, just because there is competition here for the pick, you think it looks something like this, maybe pick 72. I know this doesn't matter a ton what the trade packages are at the end of the day because it's one round, but that's probably where I would have. Would you agree with that?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
All right. Well, we're gonna roll with that then. Um, let's go ahead and let's make Ashton Genty a Chicago Bear once again. Just incredible season, right? 2,595 yards, almost broke the record by Barry Sanders. It's a great pick for Chicago for him to fall here. So definitely love that one. And you are up on the board with the financial hell team in the New Orleans Saints, although eventually it'll get better one day. What are you looking to do here at number 9, whether it's picking or looking to trade out?
I think they would look. I think they would look to trade. They'd wait, see if there were any offers. I don't know if there's anyone left anybody's going to trade up for. So let's just assume that they're not going to get the offer that they want. Um,
Okay.
I think what I would do here is I think that New Orleans needs, running back. They're not going to go this early. They'll bring in somebody to develop for sure. Wide receiver again. I think if they were going to take a wide receiver, it would have been Ted. And he's gone. As much as I like Golden, I like Luther Bird, and I think those guys have a tremendous amount of potential. Um, Unless the Saints got a phone call and the phone rang for somebody who wanted to trade up. I think they're going to take the guy who I think has the most, or I would take the guy who had the most potential impact to really be an impact player on defense, and that's going to be Jahad Campbell from Alabama.
Okay. Yeah, this was one of the guys I was thinking about here a little bit too. I had heard this connection, I think, listening to NFL Stock Exchange this last week. Be a smart player to bring in. They've obviously got some aging players on defense. You allow him to play and develop with those guys, and you get someone with just immense potential, and someone as well who does have the size to pass rush. You might have some upside there that you can work with, and that is a part of what justifies being able to take a linebacker this early. And also, of course, the draft class and how strong it is at this point, because you see you're kind of running out of options at this point for some of the top players. So I definitely like that pick for the Saints. I think that's a really good fit. Now, Carolina, kind of back in the same exact situation here. Two players going off the board that you're probably not taking to this team. I think I know what direction I would go here. Let me just make sure I'm not like missing a player. This is maybe a little early for where I'd have him on my board, but this is a defense that does need a lot of help. And I think adding Jalen Walker, who could maybe fill some of that Frankie Louvu role that they used to have, be a good pass rusher for them, also fill in a position they need in linebacker. I just think bringing that in and also getting the leadership and the character out of him that he has, it's a good addition for this team at this point. A team that just really needs additions on the defense. So looking at it, I don't see a player that's so much more valuable and is a need or a place they can address that I would take them over Jalen Walker. Perhaps Will Johnson could be talked about a little bit. I don't know how big the need is at defensive back, but I'm going to go with Jalen Walker here, and this kind of feels like something that could happen on draft night at pick number 8 for them.
Yeah, I totally could see it. He's very high on my board. A lot like Campbell, could be a huge, impactful player, going to make his presence known. Yeah, I like the pick.
Awesome. So you're here at number 11 with some good options, I see, for San Francisco. Sometimes when that happens, you might think about moving back a couple spots. I know Jacksonville did that last year, had a lot of good options on the board at 17. Still got one at 23, but maybe you can't do that. What are you doing with the 49ers pick here?
So this is a guy I would hate it if the Jets picked. I talked about it before, but I love it for the Niners, and I'll say why. I believe that Will Campbell is going to, a very good chance, is going to end up a guard in the league. And it's not just because of the combines where his arms are like 32 and 3/4, like his arm length weighed in very low. But even when you watch his film, he lines up centered. He's afraid to line up against, like when he was played left tackle, against the right shoulder pad, because he's afraid of getting beat on the outside. He plays a little stiff. I don't like that he doesn't get low down. I think he's going to lose out on leverage. But there's a chance that I'm wrong, and there's a chance that he could come into the Niners and be a good tackle and be an outlier, be one of the 9% currently that have under 34-inch arm width and make it as a tackle. But what I love about Will Campbell for the Niners is they need offensive line help at guard as well. And Will Campbell is the number one guard prospect, in my opinion. I don't think there's a better prospect and somebody with a higher floor and a higher ceiling both than Will Campbell as a guard. I think he's a future all-pro guard. So you get your chance to fill tackle. If it doesn't work out, you have this parachute where, we didn't completely lose out because we got the best guard in the draft. And we got a guy who's going to make an impact in the league. So I think the Niners are going to go and just address their offensive line by taking Will Campbell.
Well, and look at the guard position as well and how much it gets paid now. Like, even if you quote-unquote miss on this player and he has to play inside, they're still getting paid a lot of money. I mean, this is a good market for the position. So I definitely like the idea of Will Campbell there. If this was a month or two ago, I may have pushed back against him being the top guard and said, oh, Tyler Booker, he's such a good prospect, right? And he still is, but not a good combine performance. There's legit questions about the speed and the athletic ability. I still think he's a great prospect. Don't get me wrong, but Will Campbell, I think, definitely would have to be considered as at least one of the top guards, if not the top guard. So I do like that selection for them. It was that or probably Jahdae Barron for me would be the two players I'd be looking at the most. But I
Yeah.
think that's definitely good. Now, speaking actually of the devil here, we might be taking Jahdae Barron for the Cowboys because they did lose Jordan Lewis in free agency, and that was their slot guy. You could keep a player home in Texas and get someone who I do actually have as a blue chip prospect in this class if he's in the nickel. Our other options here, I mean, you do have some players that are definitely worth talking about. You get a tackle in Armand Membu. You did also just get Tyler Guyton last year. Will Johnson, still a top player here, just not really as much of a need for them. Luther Burden, if he didn't play the slot as much, might fit, right? Same for Emeka Egbuka, although it's probably too early for him. I think at this point, it's a need. It's a top player. It really helps out their defense, and they kind of struggle in run defense already. Barron can help with that. So at this point, you're taking the best player. You're filling a need. I wouldn't have any problem with that, and I'd be taking Jahdae Barron at number 12 for the Cowboys.
Hey, I like the pick. It's like that's a big drop for him. Like it's gonna be even though we're doing it and we're giving our reasons why. It would be surprising if Barron was still there for the Cowboys, and I think it would be a great pick for them. I think he's a fantastic football player, and he's going to make their secondary better instantly, day one.
Yeah, it's hard to know where he's going to go, honestly, at this point, because Barron, I mean, I could see the Devon Witherspoon track for him where I don't think 5 necessarily. I don't think he's going to Jacksonville because we already got enough people who are built to play in the slot. But I think he could go top 10. He's that type of player. But you've also seen Brian Branch and Cooper DeJean fall to the second for God knows what reason. So is it possible Barron falls because of the size? At the same time, it's an incredible athlete coming off an incredible season. The only thing is, size? And he's still big enough to where he can play in the slot and could play outside. So I think this is a great pick for the Cowboys if that's available to you. Now, 13 with the Dolphins, I feel like I know what you're going to do here, considering you would have taken this player earlier. We'll see if I'm right on that. But what direction are you going for the Miami Dolphins?
Yeah, I mean, given their coach, given their offense, given their love for speed, given their love for athleticism, given that they need a guard and a tackle, I think that Armand Membu is a tackle, and I think he will remain a tackle and succeed as a tackle. There are some people who mumble that they think he could be guard. Again, offers that nice safety net. The fact that he can be a guard means if he doesn't work out at tackle, he could be a guard on a team that needs guard as well. So you have a little bit of a safety net. I think they'd be really disappointed if he didn't work out as a tackle, but I think that but again, knowing that you have a guy that you could move over that would be a very high prospect for that position is a really nice luxury. I think Armand Membu will displace their current tackle. I forgot his name. The guy that they had. Some of the fans like him in Miami. I had people argue with me, Miami fans, but I don't think he's that good. I think is their left tackle. They signed someone.
Teron Armstead. That's the only one I know.
He was the other one that that one of their Miami fans that watches my channel.
Austin Jackson. I don't know.
I'll just say that this is 100% a logical pick for the Miami Dolphins to bring in an athletic tackle to go with their speedy running backs. That's a tackle who has the athleticism, Mambu, to get to the outside, to put him in motion, to get to the second level. It's a perfect fit for them.
Yeah, no, I love the pick. Made tons of sense from the moment you look at the board. And whether he's a tackle or a guard, they do have that need because they just haven't done enough on the offensive line since losing some top players. And it's time to fix it if he wants to keep his job, especially, and wants to keep his quarterback on the field. So totally there with that pick. This one for me, for the Colts, I do think this is going to be really easy for me. I mentioned this before the recording, but I just rewatched Colston Loveland just yesterday, and I was really impressed by what I saw. Very different evaluation of what I originally had. Obviously, he doesn't have the greatest size in the world to block. He is, we'll actually get the official size here, 248 pounds, 6'5.5". It is something to work with as a blocker, and he's very strong pound for pound. He's just not elite in that category. At the same time, he is coming from an offense that had a lot of run blocking involved because that's what they do in Michigan. They run the football. So you've got someone who's coming from a system that is going to allow what would have been his top weakness to, in my opinion, still be a strength. And at the same time, you talk about the receiving side of him, he is an incredible tight end. This felt like a really weird comparison. I'm not saying he's the same player. I'm going to make that very clear before I say this. The way Colston Loveland runs and plays after the catch, it reminds me of Cooper Kupp almost. It's like this forward-leaning type of style. He's just ready to run through people after the catch. Colston Loveland is a very, very good yak player. And I almost wonder if like some of this comes from working on a farm when he was younger and some of the strength you develop from that. Seems like people who do that type of work every day just end up being stronger. And I think Loveland is one of those guys. But ultimately, for the Indianapolis Colts, you have a big need at this position. You need a guy who's going to get this offense moving. You need to make things easier on Anthony Richardson if you want to work out with him. And this just feels like the best option for the Colts in the first round, if I'm being completely honest. So that's going to be the direction I go.
All right. I think that is the pick I would make. I think it's if Warren is number one on their board, and I think they're looking at Loveland as their number two backup option without question. And I think they're right to do it. I think it is a huge need for them. I think that Colston Loveland has an incredibly high ceiling, probably as high as Warren. The only difference I have with him and Warren is that Warren has the higher floor. But I think that Colston Loveland might end up being the best tight end in the draft in, fast forward 10 years looking back at it.
Yeah, it could go either way. I think they're both going to be incredible players, but I felt like I definitely was not giving Loveland enough respect before I watched this film again. And so Colts are in a great situation if they want to address tight end. As long as two of them don't go before their pick, and I just wouldn't expect that to be the case. So we got the Atlanta Falcons on the board here. A lot of options for them that they could go after. What's going to be the pick for you here? Or are you looking to maybe trade out? Is there maybe a player that someone would want to target here?
I don't know if there's anybody here. I think the scouts would recognize that the value in this draft is the end of the first round, second, third round. That's the sweet spot of this year's draft. This is a year where I would expect most teams are all looking to trade back, and going to be very hard to find people who are looking to trade up, especially at this point. They got probably 20 players here that all could be argued, like based on needs and everything, to be really at the same level.
Yeah, a lot of same grades.
The same grades. So I think Atlanta's going to stick here. I think there's two directions I could see them going. I can always see someone going for edge, right? It's always easy to see that as a possibility for any team. I love Mike Green. We all know why he left the Senior Bowl. He had a rep that went beyond belief. James Pierce, obviously, great talent. But the other way Atlanta could go, you're talking about, again, just they have this young quarterback. They have this big, tall target, this big receiver in Drake London. What they don't have is their Garrett Wilson, I'll use as my player comp type. Your explosive, incredibly crisp route runner. You're quick, get open fast kind of guy. I think that Matthew Golden would be just a tremendous compliment to Drake London. So I think that what better gift can you give your young quarterback than that? A guy who can get open really quick, gets off the line of scrimmage really quick, great football speed, and just really, really awesome route running. Probably maybe my favorite in the draft. As far as the crispest route runner. I don't see him as I see him as a potential WR1. I know people say, not everybody agrees with that, but I see him at that level. So I would pick Matthew Golden here. He'd be my guy.
Yeah, Matthew Golden is a very interesting evaluation for me. I will be honest, I am a little bit lower on him, but he is someone that it just, to me, feels like there's a really good chance I'm going to turn on the film next time and I'm going to see what I'm not seeing. And that happens, honestly, for me as a freelance scout. There's times I just don't recognize it with players. That could be the case with Golden. I think my biggest question was if the speed really shows up on film that he showed at the combine. I didn't see as much of that from what I watched. Could have just been the game it was. Maybe there was an injury he was dealing with. Something I don't know. That is probably my biggest question there. But when you run a 4.2 as a wide receiver, man, you got a lot of potential. So I think definitely from the perspective of adding at that position a valuable position and getting someone to fit with Drake London, it is a tremendous fit for the Atlanta Falcons and something I haven't seen before, but totally understand it. I think it's a good pick here. Pick number 16 for me. I think this is, well, there's a lot of options you could go with, but I do think this is really easy for me. They could still use a cornerback. Feels like they've needed a cornerback for like 100 years now. Every year I look at the Cardinals and it's a need on here. Will Johnson is still on the board, so we are going to roll with him here at 16. It's just a question of, I guess, the long speed, and for some reason he has not decided to actually run the 40-yard dash and prove it. I think maybe there's some injury stuff there, but I would have liked to see it. I think it would have helped his draft stock a lot, but you're falling this far. That's a tremendous value because the ceiling is, what, Pat Surtain the second? So if you get that, I mean, you're getting one of the best picks in the class. We'll just have to see if that's actually the case.
I like the pick. I love Will Johnson.
Feel a little different, or okay.
Will Johnson can end up being the steal of the draft, in my opinion. In fact, like he might be the best corner in the draft. He has the potential that he could be a top 3 cornerback in the league in 2 years from now. Like he has that ceiling. He really is a special player. He's sticky like glue. He's a great cover guy. Nothing wrong with that pick at all. Like they may end up being very, very happy about that pick. So I think it's a great pick. I totally agree with it. He's who I would have picked. If I would have had Arizona's pick, I would have made that same pick.
I gotcha. Yeah, I was curious for a second if you were going to disagree with that first, but
no.
Yeah,
I would have made that pick. I've been eyeing Will Johnson's name the whole time we've been here, like wondering when are we going to get to Will Johnson.
It might be that way on draft night.
Yeah,
feels crazy to say it after where he's been throughout most of this process. I mean, he's a top player, and all of a sudden it just seems like things have flipped on him, and it's like we got all these questions. Potential's still there, but yeah, I mean, he could have gone earlier here. It's just a question of need for some of these teams, and we talked about it a little bit. Number 10 for the Panthers could have been number 8 if they had stayed there, but it could be the way things play out. We'll have to see. Cincinnati Bengals at 17. This will be, let's see what we do here. What are the top players we still have available? I think for me, it is Josh Simmons at this point, actually. I am a big Josh Simmons fan, so probably a little biased there in some ways. What's the edge situation with them? I know Trey Hendrickson's there still. Sam Hubbard retired. Is that correct?
Yeah, they need help all along their defensive line. I don't think it's a question that they go defense here. Like I don't think it's a question at all. Half the team's salary cap is 2 wide receivers and a quarterback, right? I mean, all their money is in their offense. They don't have any money to invest in their defense. They have to build the defense to the draft. So you could really it's hard to even make a mistake at this point. I'm gonna go, if it was me, I'm going with my safest guy, right? There's always a little bit of risk with edge because if they don't put up those numbers, then you're like, What did we do? And we see edges miss all the time. To me, the most solid guy, predictable, definitely a super high floor. Doesn't go. It's not strength and being able to move people and be a stopper doesn't have a slump, and that's why I like Kenneth Grant here. I think there's a
Okay.
possibility he's a big reason for Mason Graham's success. Because Kenneth Grant took a lot of double teams in Michigan.
Yeah, it's a fair
Very
argument.
good, very good lateral player, moves laterally very well, which really makes him excellent against the run. Very strong. Um, might end up being a guy that teams need to double team. And man, I mean, how much does that help, right? If they're forced to have to double team a guy, that's going to help the rest of the defense and the rest of the guys on the defensive line. So I think if I'm Cincinnati, I'm going to go with Kenneth Grant here. I have him a lot closer in grade to Mason Graham than most people.
And that's completely fair. I think everything you said made a lot of sense. My only difference, it's not really about Kenneth Grant here, but if I'm the Cincinnati Bengals, I'm trying to think of what's going to get me past the Kansas City Chiefs. Now, I watched the Super Bowl, and I see a team that just has a dominant defensive line and is able to get after the quarterback. And that's the biggest thing, getting after the quarterback. And Kenneth Grant, he could help with that for sure. He's definitely going to be someone who can push the pocket and get some sack production, even as a nose tackle, really, at the end of the day. I kind of think about Walter Nolan, who isn't my highest grade guy here, but
I love
he
Walter
is
Nolan.
someone who could. I think he can get after the quarterback from the interior. I mean, I was watching, was it Jared Wilson, the Georgia center? Every time he went up against Walter Nolan, he's blowing him up every single play. And you don't see that on these Eric games as much from Jared Wilson, although I don't have him as like this super highly graded player. But you just see the impact that he has. It is a little risky just because there's some character questions we've heard of, and he's not doing all the testing, and maybe that doesn't mean anything. Gosh, I think I'm gonna go that direction just for the sake of our goal is to take down Patrick Mahomes. So that is gonna be the pick for me here. Just a really big swing. Could be a miss, could be a hit, but you gotta get some playmakers, I think, on that defensive line, and that's probably the one I'd feel could impact Mahomes the most when you're playing those big games that you hope to be in.
Well, Walter Nolan is my number 3 defensive tackle. Very, very close to Kenneth Grant. I take him if he's in the. Every time I've ever done a mock draft where he's there in the second round, I have the Jets take him. If I haven't taken a
That's a
defensive tackle,
steal.
that's a steal, right? So, can't really argue with that pick if he's your cup of tea. I think that we agree on the most important thing, and that is that Cincinnati should go defense and go defensive line.
Yeah, definitely. And I will say, I think the floor for him is probably Philadelphia. I know they obviously have a lot on the defensive line, but could be kind of your Milton Williams replacement there. But who knows? I mean, character issues that could drop him. But man, if he was there for the Jets, my gosh, like
Yes.
I think every Jets fan would be losing their mind in a good way.
Yeah, you'd hope.
Yeah, they better be. Seattle here. This might be Josh Simmons for me at this point. Who is there? Is Abraham Lucas? Is there a tackle across from Charles Cross? Is that correct?
Yeah, yeah.
I don't
You know
know
what?
where he is in his career, but I think it's an area you could upgrade.
I mean, Josh Simmons is, you take away the injuries, probably the number 1 rated tackle in the draft.
Yeah, he is for me. He is my top tackle in this class. I have him, even with the injury, he is number 10. So he is in my top 10. Could have been a blue chip guy if he got to play out the whole year. It is a question of if the spot is there. I'm going to take a quick look at how Abraham Lucas is grayed out. I know PFF isn't going to replace film here, but yeah, so he is, I think, still with Seattle. Yeah, this isn't going to stop me. Sorry. If I'm willing to replace Walker Little with Josh Simmons, who is a better player, I think, than what Abraham Lucas is, and not saying that would be what I would be shooting for above everything, but I'd be okay with it. That's not going to stop me from taking Simmons. It doesn't help you a ton on the interior. Obviously, that's the big thing here, but I'm not going to pass on a top tackle to a team that could use one. And shoot. I mean, maybe you can move Lucas inside or figure something else out there. So that's going to be my pick for Seattle. A little bit different, but just can't let him fall any further.
Nice. Or to Tampa Bay. I think Tampa Bay is it's a very solid, easy pick for me at 19. Knowing their coach, knowing how they've made their living, and your cursor is right on it. I think this is the point where Mike Green has got to come off that board.
He's going to show up to the draft with an NFC South hat. This really feels that way. There's so many teams in the NFC South that could use him.
Yeah,
but,
yeah.
Top edge rusher, top need.
I will never forget. I will never in my life forget that rep he had at the Senior Bowl.
He had to go on Twitter and like stand up for the guy. I don't know if you saw that after, but like he went on Twitter later that night. He was like, "Just remember, Josh Connerly is still a good football player." Something along those lines.
You know what? I love Connerly. I love Connerly. I think that if the Jets didn't take a tackle in the first round and Connerly was on the board in the second round, I'd sprint to the podium. So I'm glad he did that for him, because it's one bad rep and people shouldn't overanalyze one bad rep. But for Mike Green's part, man, what a rep that was. I mean, the guy literally booked his flight home after that rep.
Oh yeah, and they set up tackles in a rough situation there. I mean, we kind of saw with Wyatt Milam over the week too. He struggled, and they had him playing. Connerly was at right tackle on the play. It's like that's not what he does for Oregon. It's not his natural position. So you're giving the defenders quite an advantage there. So yeah, that's exactly what I would have done at 19. That'd be the pick for me. 20 for the Broncos. Oh man, I think I know what I'm doing.
I think I know what you're gonna do.
Well, there's a couple options actually. Now that I'm looking a little closer at this, at first I'm thinking Luther Burden would be the direction I'd think about going. You need more on offense. Evan Ingram's a great pickup for them. Say that as a Jaguars fan, still a really good player. You don't have like a dominant slot guy, so Luther Burden could help there. That could be a direction they go. Ingram could also kind of play that role. To be fair, he's more of a receiver. You could also talk about Omarion Hampton if you want to get to running back. Just personally, I'm not that high on him. He might sneak in at the end of the first round, but probably not someone I'm going to take exactly that high. Looking down the rest of the board, I don't see any other names that are going to convince me here. So it is going to be between Luther Burden, and I could also throw in Emeka Egbuka. But we are going to go Luther Burden here at pick number 20 for this. So did I pick who you thought I was going to? I'm questioning whether that's the case or not.
If I went wide receiver, I think Burden's a great pick. You know, he has. I don't love him for the Jets because he has a similar build and size to Malachi Corley, who I haven't given up on yet. But,
yeah, don't give up.
I think Luther Burden's a much better player. As far as that's why he's a first round pick, and we got Corley in the third round last year, and he barely played. But I think that like with me, it was like, well, I don't know if it's the right match for my team, but I think that when you watch the film, Burden is a great pick. I think he's very dangerous when he gets the football. And a lot of people overlook him. He's a big play guy. Big play is solid all around guy. Doesn't have any really negatives. There's very little I could say about him that's bad when you watch him. He doesn't have the typical build. He's one of those guys that looks more like a running back. In some regards, his kind of size and everything, but he certainly plays well as a wide receiver. So, I don't know. I think it's a solid pick.
Yeah, and it is honestly very close for me between him and Egbuka. I do think Burden has a higher ceiling, but at the end of the day, I just think that's the direction I would go for the Broncos and just add some firepower to this offense and let Bo Nix have that much better of a situation to work with. So you're up at 21 with the Pittsburgh Steelers. I'm curious to see what direction you go here because I think there's plenty of options to talk about. Maybe it's obvious, but who would you be taking here?
Well, the Steelers like two things that they have a need for, so it's not an easy decision. The one is the Steelers have a history of having great safeties that cause turnovers, ball hawking safeties. We got two really good safeties on the board right now that were not picked. That could be great picks here, right? Starks and then Nick, and I don't want to try to say his last name.
Yeah, good luck.
Manumurura. Um, so there's a couple of really good guys, but at the end of the day, the Pittsburgh Steelers build in the trenches. They definitely might consider Amari and Hampton, by the way.
Yeah,
But until the Steelers have their, like I think traditionally when you look at them, I think that what they want above all else before they build everything else is they want to have their tackles. They want to be set at offensive tackle. And I think that Kelvin Banks Jr. is a grand slam here for them.
yeah, he's fallen. It feels like he could be a guy who could fall on draft day. I find that consistently happening. Maybe I'm just overlooking him too often, but yeah, you've got a guy with a lot to work with here. Good value, right? It should be going higher than this. Still young. I think it's a great pick for the Pittsburgh Steelers and continuing to set up that offense. Of course, the big question is you don't have a quarterback. You got pretty much no plan there. That situation is just hell. I'm sure you guys understand that, and they're probably laughing at it rightfully so. I know I am, even not as a Jets fan. Maybe I'm
Yeah,
alone there.
the Steelers are without question in my mind looking to 2026 as their quarterback year. Don't be
Yeah, they have.
surprised if don't be surprised if you don't don't be surprised if they trade back here to try to accumulate more picks for ammunition or in the later rounds. If you see the Steelers collecting lots of picks, it's because next year they're gonna do everything they can in 26 to move up and get their quarterback.
Yep, completely agree. Now, this might be the quickest pick I've made here. I'm just going to keep this very simple. This is Kenneth Grant for me. Jim Harbaugh's super high on him, right?
Yeah,
A lot of
this
good
guy.
things to say about him from college. They just lost Puna Ford. Like, let's get in a guy who's going to stop the run. We know how much Jim Harbaugh loves the run. I'm sure he wants to stop it as well. Easy pick with Kenneth Grant. Surely there are other players we could discuss here, but I think that's a really good fit for them and getting in another Michigan guy to Los Angeles.
It's an absolute grand slam, like and match made in heaven, no brainer. If Kevin Grant is on the board at 22, there's just no question in my mind where he's going. And what they're doing.
Yeah.
They're taking Kenneth Grant for sure. They are. It's a great pick. What do they like to do? The Chargers. They like to own time of possession. They like to run the ball. They like to eat up the clock. And what do they like to do on defense? They like to take away the other team's run. And who better to do that than Kenneth Grant?
Yeah, that's going to be the quickest one I think we got.
Yeah. I think Green Bay here is going to go for an edge. I think they are going to, I think they're going to want to disrupt. They could go wide receiver. I would not be shocked if they took Emeka Egbuka. I do not think it would be a bad pick at all. But I think at the end of the day, they are going to want to add to their defense, and I think that there's a lot. It's a very deep draft with edge. There's a lot of really high quality players. Obviously, it's between James Pierce and Donovan. I think they're just gonna. I'm gonna cheap out and just take the higher right guy here, and say that they're gonna take James Pierce. Now, I admittedly have not spent a ton of time on edge compared to other positions because it's not a place I expect the Jets to go in the first few rounds. So as being a Jets guy, I didn't spend hours of tape on that or anything like that. I just know that all these edges all have very high ceilings. Any of these guys, even Michael Williams from Georgia, any of these guys, Shamar Stewart, any of these guys might be the best edge in the draft outside of Abdul Carter. Like, we really don't know who's going to be the best out of them. It's kind of like who you like. So I'm just going to take a wild guess in that and just say Green Bay is going to like James Pierce the best. And I think that's what I would do if I had to pick one of them. I think that's the name that jumps out at me.
Yeah, it does feel like a lot of those players are clumped up there for sure. And Pierce is a ton of upside, right? I remember before this year thinking he was the top player in the class, just from what I had heard and the little I had seen. Obviously, it doesn't end up that way, but he's still a tremendous prospect from a potential standpoint and makes sense for Green Bay. So I do like that fit there, and I think it's a good pick. 24 for the Vikings. Okay. I think we're doing a trade here. Here's the reason: 4 picks this year. It's not good. Now, I do want to open this up to more teams than the one I'm going to suggest. And I don't really want to be the guy who's just going to say, oh, let's move the Jaguars back up into the first round so we could pick for them again. I do think it could make sense given you look at these picks: 88, 126. That gets this trade done. Obviously, it says we're not interested, but it is pretty equal value, and they could get their picks back. Jacksonville could get aggressive, but we'll do something different here because I've probably done this on the channel too many times now. Are there any teams that you think could move up here? And if there aren't, that's fine. We can pick here for Minnesota. But who would be some of those candidates you think there could be of what's down here?
I think they're too far back and they can't afford to give it up, and they don't have the ammunition. I know that a lot of Jet fans want the Jets to trade up a little bit, but I think this is too high. I don't think they have the ammunition to trade up this high. I know who they would trade up for, but I just don't think they have the ammunition. So I can't say the Jets.
Yeah, you see, what would be the player you think? I would say Shamar Stewart would be one of those guys where a team's going to see a lot of potential in him. Not that he's Trayvon Walker, but it could be some of the same argument you could see there. Malachi Starks, I don't see his safety getting traded up for, but still a really good
Jets,
player.
If the Jets were to have this pick, based on who they already picked in this draft, they would take Emeka Egbuka. Because they need a wide receiver. They need a wide receiver. They need someone to play next to Garrett. There are some guys that might be there in the second round, but if the Jets were going to trade up, that's, I think, who it would be for.
You think it's possible that the Eagles would want to move up for Shamar Stewart here?
I think the Eagles want an edge. I think that they want to get rid of Bryce Huff, get him off that team. He didn't work out. They wanted that pass rush specialist. It didn't work out with Bryce Huff. So they're not going to spend more money on the position, but they could certainly are in a luxury position draft-wise to, based on the strength of their roster, that they could trade picks and they can get up to get their one guy, their one key guy. And that would make, man, if they got him, and they're not stupid. If they added him on here, man, I don't want to think about how good that team and hard to beat they're going to be.
Yeah, and I think it's a great place to go develop a player as well. I think it's a strong defensive line. You're going to have a great support system there, and we know that they need a dominant pass rusher. Obviously, they've got Nolan Smith there. They've got some players. They also lost Josh Sweat. Bryce Huff has not been great for them. So I think that's the direction we're going to go here with pick 24, because Minnesota is going to want to trade back. And I could see it not being a super expensive trade. The trade I always think of with late first round is Jacksonville and Tampa trading a few years ago. It was 27 for 33, and then Jacksonville gave up an early fourth. It was the first pick at day 4 and then a sixth. I think 96 gets you most of the way there. This could be a little cheaper to trade this year, so let's say maybe 161. This might not be a ton to send to Minnesota, but you think that's something that could get passed?
It's possible. Minnesota doesn't have any crazy needs that they might not think they can get in that spot anyway, and adding on 96 is never a bad thing.
Yeah, and I mean, they do have the compensatory pick that does help out. I'm sure they'd love to get a second-round pick, but I think that's just a little too rich here in this type of class where a lot of the players are going to be the same. And the guy you might be thinking about with Minnesota here Might be there at 32. Just alluding to that a little bit. We'll see who that is at that pick. But I'm going to do this for the trade. Maybe it's a little different, but I do think Minnesota wants to move out, and this is a great opportunity for the Philadelphia Eagles to move up. I probably, if I was being predictive, shouldn't discount Michael Williams just because he's from Georgia. Seems like that's all they want to do is pick Georgia players, but Shamar Stewart, I think, would be a tremendous fit here for the Eagles at 24. So you're up at 25 with the Houston Texans. I'm sure there's a lot of ways they could go. I'm sure CJ Stroud's probably begging for a receiver again, like he does every year, even though the offensive line needs help desperately. What would you do here at 25 for the Texans?
Yeah, I actually, it's not much to think about. They're gonna. I would grab a Mecca Ibuka. I love him. I think it's a great spot to grab him. Uh, yeah, it's just a no-brainer to me for Houston. They had that horrible injury to Tank or whatever. They need the wide receiver help, and this is your guy. Like he'd be dangerous, and he also has some familiarity with that quarterback. At least they have a shared history of where they went to college.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have anything against that pick. Honestly, I obviously think they need offensive line, but this is the kind of selection you can justify, right? You have the chemistry there with CJ Stroud and Emeka Egbuka. This is a really good player as well, someone who's just going to be a hit in the first round. And you can address some of these positions later in the draft. I don't know how much draft capital they have. We'll actually take a look here. They've got an extra third, missing the fourth, and they got some late picks here. But you can do something with that. That could be, I know you guys love Miles Frazier. Could be players like that you're taking on day 2. So I do like that pick for the Texans. I'm sure the Rams are, well, I'll say if I was the Rams, I'd be very disappointed here seeing that happen just before my selection. And maybe you could have considered moving up to 24, but you're going to have to figure out something else here because Emeka Egbuka is not available. So for the Rams, man, I think you got to look at cornerback for sure. It just feels almost like a reach here for me on these players. Like the one I would say that would fit the most is probably Maxwell Hairston. I don't have this high of a grade on him to say I would go do that. I think of these other players, I mean, Gray Zabel's a great player. He's not playing tackle, so that's not really going to be a fit for you. And they've got some good players at guard. I'm sure you'd be talking about Josh Connerly here a little bit. I don't know. I don't have as high of a grade on him, I would say, but you are kind of in a position where this might make the most sense, and that's kind of where things get set up for them. So we'll look at tackles really quick. Yeah, Connerly, at this point, I think he would be among my highest grade guys. What do you think about Josh Connerly here with the Rams?
I love him. He's very close. I would say behind Membu maybe. Like I think I would put him as my number 2 tackle. Very, very close to Membu. I really like him that much. I love the player.
Yeah, and one thing that really stood out to me about him at the Senior Bowl, I was on the field trying to do an interview with Marcus and Bo. I tried all week, could not get the guy, no matter what I did. But Connerly was out there after practices every day, just trying to get coached up, trying to get lessons, to get better, improve his craft. I did really appreciate seeing that, took note of it. I think this is the guy who wants to be great, and he's definitely got a lot of tools to work with, and is a player on the rise. So I think if you're the Rams, you feel comfortable with that. It's maybe not the top player you would have taken at 26. We probably disagree on that. That's okay. But it is still a player that fits the need, and I think you get a really good addition out of it. So 27 for the Ravens here. I think you got some good options looking at this.
Yeah.
Man.
There's some good guys. I think that they are going to go for a cornerback.
Okay.
I think because I think they have to replace the Stevens. who they just lost in free agency.
They they need someone else aside from Nate Wiggins. You think?
Well, they need a CB2, don't they?
Do they not have anyone else? I actually
I don't
wasn't
know.
familiar
I mean,
that they were in
they
that
just
bad of a
lost
situation.
they just lost their starter from last year.
Okay,
Stevens.
I know they drafted TJ Tampa, but he's not stopping it here, I'd say.
Yeah, except I right now the guy I love that's left is Trey Amos
All right.
from Mississippi. It was between him and, believe it or not, the other guy that I have equal with him is Thomas.
Okay,
Uh,
yeah.
Arthur Thomas, like that. Those are the two that I love. I love Revel also. I think it's a very deep draft in cornerbacks. I like a lot of these guys. All these guys could be first rounders. I think from Thomas to uh, I think Revel, Trey, any of them, all, I mean, still might. There's still some time left, but like all those guys are potential first round picks in my opinion.
Yeah, I see. When I looked at cornerback and I thought about fits here, I kind of thought about the player as well that you could argue as a comp to Nate Wiggins, and that was Benjamin Morrison for me. I know you obviously have a huge question about the hip and what that's going to mean, if he's going to be able to play and how healthy he is. There's just a lot of ambiguity there. But I do think he could have been a really great fit there too. The good thing, though, there's a lot of cornerbacks that I think would kind of fit that style of play, the press man type of style, and I think Trey Amos is a really good prospect there for sure. So I have no problem with that pick. It's just a lot of options that you could go with if you're going cornerback at that point.
Yeah, and tons of options, so many, and I think this is where they're going to start to fall. So
Yeah, now with the Detroit Lions, okay, I think this is easy for me. You'd love to get edge, right? Be great to go there. There's not a player I would love here. I mean, Nick Scourton would be close for me as far as getting to the top of my board, but they need a guard, and I do love Tyler Booker. I think in this situation, Gray Zabel just feels like maybe a little bit better for Detroit here. You just get someone who's going to be a really nice addition there and lock down that guard spot and just keep one of the best offensive lines in the NFL at the top. So that's going to be the direction I go there. It's kind of close for me between those two, but I am going to go with Zabel in that case.
nice.
See what we got for Washington here.
Yeah, I have a feeling that I have an opinion for Washington in this situation.
Okay, I'd love to hear that opinion.
I think that they might want to help their rookie quarterback,
That could make
and
sense.
and I think that one of the ways to do that is to bring in a Marion Hampton.
Yeah, I thought you might go there. I've heard this one a little bit more recently as an idea. So, what are your thoughts here on Marion Hampton? Just how does he fit into this offense? What's your vision, I guess, for him and Brian Robinson? Is that really considered into this? Just kind of your thoughts there on how they use him.
I think he's what I like about him is he's that kind of guy that you could use as a workhorse back that can, first second down, the 4 yards, the 4 to 5 yards per carry kind of thing. But he also in space could be very dangerous. He could be very explosive. Um, he could, like he could read blocks. He reads the field really well. So I think he also has that combination of, yeah, you could use him as a guy that wears the team down, have a drive where he's running 4 or 5 yards a carry, wear down the defensive line, but he's also a guy who could explode for big runs, and be a home run hitter. So I kind of like that combination that he has.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I know going into the year, I think the vision was kind of one of the big question marks here, and I at a point had him as my top running back in this class. He's still a high ranked guy for me after probably dropping for a bit, but he did improve in that regard. He's a very special size and speed combination, and I think that's a great fit for the Washington offense and just getting another playmaker in there to help out their quarterback. And you think about just how much better they would be with these additions that they brought in. I think there's the chance to just I don't know. It's hard to think about Jaden Daniels being better than what he was in 2024, but you could have a special season making these additions to that offense. So I do love that pick. I think it makes a lot of sense for the Washington Commanders. Now, the Buffalo Bills at number 30. Oh, man. What do we do here? There's probably something screaming out to me if I look close enough. I think you could go with a pass rusher. Definitely could be a need there. Could they use help on the interior, you think? I've heard some talk about Derek Harmon.
I think that if they did, I don't know if they would use their 30 on it. I think they would use their second round on it. I would
Yeah,
imagine them. I would
yeah,
imagine
there's a lot
them.
of value there.
I think the value right now. I think you want to look at the cornerbacks. Like they definitely love a good cornerback, or and then edge. I mean, there's just good players left right now that might not be there at 60. I think a lot of those top edges and the cornerbacks are all going to be gone. So I think they would go either edge or corner.
Yeah, for me in this situation, I think my top edge would be Nick Scourton or
Me
Scourton,
too.
whichever it is.
I agree
Um,
on that.
yeah, corner would be worth thinking about here. They did just sign a big extension with was it Christian Benford the other day? It was like 19 million a year, which it's always interesting when you hear those extensions for players you don't really know as much. And he was a guy I didn't hear about until this last year. I'm not sure what scheme exactly or what type of coverage they primarily run on the back end for Buffalo, so that kind of inhibits me here in choosing a player at cornerback. And I am just going to say that Scorton is probably my highest ranked guy on the board at this point. Getting another guy who's going to be able to get pressure on Mahomes, it's your big thing. I mean, if you're Buffalo, if you're Cincinnati, that's the thing I'm thinking about the most is how are we gonna stop the Chiefs and stop losing every year to them, especially if you're the Bills. I mean, how do you break this curse? And getting pressure on the quarterback is going to help you a lot in that. So that's going to be my pick here at pick number 30. Speaking of that team that has cursed them, you're up on the clock with the Kansas City Chiefs at 31. What direction you think you'll be going here for them?
Well, I think they're going to be a little disappointed because I think value wise, the tackles that would make sense here are gone. Like I just don't
Yeah,
think they're going to be able to fill, or their offensive line needs with what's left on the board. Can I take a look at the guards?
yeah, absolutely.
Ursuri would not be a horrible pick there. I do. I'm Booker, so there. I take it back. There are guys. There are guys that you could reasonably pick here, but I think that what Kansas City is going to end up doing is they'll probably go heavy on the offensive line in the later rounds and like soon. They're going to this draft, I'm sure. They've had a lot of success in drafting offensive linemen in the middle to like the between the third and fifth rounds. I think they even got a great offensive lineman that they had drafted in the sixth round. It's kind of crazy. So
Yeah,
they've had success at doing that. What I really think that fits them really well, and this would be very dangerous for the rest of the league, um, is if they ran up and they took Darius Alexander and threw him in the middle of that defensive line. I think that would spell trouble. And this is a prospect that Dom C helped me fall in love with. This guy absolutely is right after Kenneth Grant and Mason Graham. This might and Walter Nolan. I think this is my number 4 defensive tackle on the board. And like I said, this is a very deep draft at defensive tackle. I mean,
yeah.
there's just so many really good ones. So being my 4th defensive tackle in a draft like this is still a high compliment. It's high praise for the player.
Yeah, and for Kansas City, I think it's a great direction to go. The defensive line, I think, is kind of an underrated need there. You do have some great players, right? You have Chris Jones, you have George Karlaftis. You still could use an elite edge, and you could still use a running mate for Chris Jones. They really just don't have those things there right now. And so getting an Alexander absolutely gives you that. And now you're looking at a much stronger defensive line that isn't composed of guys that you may not have heard of before, because they kind of have those sorts of players. I was looking at their depth chart the other day, and there's some names you don't even hear about, and that's part of what Kansas City does so well is they get a lot out of those types of players. But why not upgrade and get a really good addition there? So yeah, I think that's a great direction for them to go. Now 32 with the Minnesota Vikings here. I am curious if I'm going to go the same direction I was thinking before. I was looking at corner here, and man, Benjamin Morrison. I think he's a damn good corner still, and if this is contingent on the injury not being as big of a deal as it could be, but I think bringing in someone like this who could play at a really high level, and you go back to the beginning of this year, I had him up there with Travis Hunter and with Will Johnson. He was not far behind. He's in that group of players to me. Obviously, he got hurt early in the season. I think this is a tremendous upside pick for the Vikings, and you add him to a defense that's so well run with Brian Flores. I think this would be the direction I go. I will ask you first, though, do you think of these corners, because there's a lot of them that are really good still on the board. Savon Ravel would be another one I would note for sure. Do you think there's a better scheme fit here for the Vikings specifically?
I don't know if I would say it's a better scheme fit. I mean, like as far as scheme, I wouldn't. I mean, he's not my favorite guy that's left on the board, but I don't think it's not for that reason. It's not for me thinking he's. It's just I really love Revel and I really love Thomas. I really love those guys. To be honest, I just kind of lost track of Benjamin Morrison.
Like us all.
I kind of lost track of him, so he's not really on the top of my mind. I think it's an interesting pick, though. I think it's an interesting pick that could have really high reward.
Yeah, that's where I'm at with this. And like I said, I think it's really close with Savon Ravel because it's kind of the same thing there. I mean, you've got this guy with just tremendous traits, got injured, sort of forgotten about. I think he's probably remembered a little bit more in Morrison just because of the incredible upside he has. Thomas, for me, the only thing that kind of stops me here, I think, is maybe the speed for him a little bit. I think he ran a 4.58 here recently, which is a little questionable at cornerback, especially for a first-round pick. Still a really good prospect, but if I'm going to go with a guy in that kind of mold, Morrison, I'd like for him to bulk up a little bit more, but I am going to just slightly give it to him over Savon Ravel at 32. So it's close, man. There's a lot of corners you could talk about.
It's not easy. There's a lot of corners, a lot of defensive tackles, a lot of edges. It's very difficult, and people could argue for hours amongst them. So it's at the end of the day, you just hope your pick works out.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a good chance of that one working out. So this is our first round mock draft we've put together. It took quite a while to get done with this, but that's normal. I think the other one was close to 2 hours as well. That just means more content. I think we had some really good conversations here. It's fun to talk about these players and really just introduce some different ideas as well. I think that this was a really good way to do that. So, hey, I really appreciate you coming on this channel. It was a lot of fun. We're going to have to do something like this again in the future when we're on probably a whole nother draft class next year. Crossing my fingers it's a good one because I want to, I don't know, 2024 just gave me this ridiculously high standard that I don't know if it's going to be met all that often, but that's just what happens when you have that good of a class. But make sure to go check out Jets Chaos on YouTube and on Twitter as well. I think it's the same handle, right?
Yeah, pretty much Jets Chaos everywhere.
Gotcha. Awesome. And you got anything you want to say before we head out of here?
Yeah, look, I had a great time. It's an honor to be invited in here to be on your channel and do this. And would love to talk ball anytime. If you want to do any previews before the Jets and the Jaguars play, let me know.
Absolutely. Hopefully we're not playing because we're the two worst teams in our division every year. That's got to stop.
Well, I thought that we were. I could be wrong. I thought that we were for some reason. I thought that I saw the
we
Jets, the teams that they were playing.
we do play because there are two teams that were worse than us, which were the Titans and the Patriots. Which is, you don't expect to see the Patriots there all that often after everything they've done this century, but it's a welcome
Right.
sight, to be honest. So yeah, we will play each other. I'll have to have you on for like a preview or something that week. Maybe Dom will come on too. That
Sure.
could be fun.
Sounds like a
All
lot
right,
of fun.
man. Awesome. Well, we'll wrap this up here. I appreciate y'all watching, and if you stuck it out for the whole thing, really impressed by that because this was a long one. But I do want to shout out our channel members before we go. Premier's here 904, Nightmare Eco, Gator John Bites, Ichi Wiener, Mr. Dolphin, Scrubber Ducky 500, Brian Foster, and Franchies. Thank you all so much for supporting this channel. Let me know your thoughts on these picks and what you would have done differently, what you agree on. We'll love to hear all that. And finally, go Jags. Oh, and Jets.